Josiah, thank you for joining us today, all the way from Arizona.
Hey, thank you so much for having me today, Eileen. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, absolute pleasure. So we talked about that this podcast is all about perfectionism.
Right.
We looked at that, right? So what is perfectionism for you? How would you describe that?
Sure. Yeah. So I I used to think that perfectionism was, a good thing. I used to
Mm,
kind of strive for perfectionism, wanting to have, great attention to detail and having higher standards. And I think it's really only been recently that I've realized that it's, setting unrealistic expectations for myself and, maybe trying too hard or needing too much control. And I think that that can often be driven by, um, the fear of failure or um, judgment from others. And it could just be, it causes overthinking and overanalyzing and kind of that um, paralyzed by overanalyzing kind of thing.
Oh yeah, that was
Um,
yes, I remember that paralysis of analysis.
yes,
Yeah, I think Churchill has also some quote about perfectionism is nothing but paralysis of action,
right.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's only recently that I've kind of, and I think your podcast did kind of help me realize that a bit, where I'm recognizing how perfectionism gets in my way, and that it's not allowing me to be uh, fully myself or getting as much work done as I could be, or a whole multitude of issues that fall out from it as a result. So yeah, I'm definitely learning to overcome that, and it's a work in progress.
Well, that's amazing that you have you believed before it was a positive thing, attention to detail, it was a good thing, and then over time, and I'm so pleased that this podcast have been helpful as well to kind of see what's happening, and that it is causing you fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of um, um, not doing it properly, and procrastinating, wasting time, not getting the job done as you would. That's really
Right.
interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing reflection, I would say. So let's have a look at the areas that you find that fear is quite strong. What
Okay.
areas would you say, is it in every aspect of your life? Or are there certain areas that you find affected a lot more by this fear of failure, fear of judgment, procrastination?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. I definitely find that it's it is really impacting my artistic life and my creative endeavors. I find myself being overly critical of my work, or being, maybe too picky about what I'm willing to share with my friends or with my family, or what I will print or publish. And so that kind of stops me before I even start. I don't really get a great move on things, especially if it's a hand painting, or something where you're actually putting in, labor to do it. And then that can kind of, I can get in my head about that stuff pretty easily. With photography, it's a little bit easier. I like to just go out and take photos, but then when it comes to actually publishing the work, I kind of trip myself up. And so I think that, trying to recognize that, or rather, yeah, recognizing that it's what I'm doing is good enough and what I'm doing is okay. And if I want to do it just for me, that's perfectly fine too. Um, but that kind of hesitation also spills over into my business, where, in my web design business, I realized that I could be writing more and sharing more information and education with my clients and with my prospects online. But then I'm always concerned about how I'm going to be perceived by my peers or people who I've met in the industry who are already more successful than me.
Mm.
And so I kind of start spinning my wheels and trying to figure out where do I fit in instead of just doing the work that I know I could be good at. And then it kind of creates this like separation of identities where I've got this one side that's my creative artistic side and then the other side that's my business side, and trying to figure out how to connect them. And yeah, so it creates a lot of different problems. But yeah, so I think in both my creative life and in my work life, it's affecting me.
Okay, that's really amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Everyone, I'm sure all our audience really appreciates how you feel about your creative life, and how critical you are about the standards of the work that you create, and the fear that comes with it when you're going to publish it, or when you finish a painting, um, and work-wise as well. Are there any other areas? How about relationships? How do you find within your relationship, or or your home life, or uh, the way, the order you have things in order, and so on? Do you find there are any other areas, or are these the two main areas for you?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, great points to bring those things up, right? Because I think the perfectionism and specifically how procrastination that is a result of perfectionism, that can have all kinds of effects in my life, right? And so if I end up, you know, procrastinating on a project because, I know that I want to make it perfect, and then I end up working too hard on that project for a week or a day, or however long it takes, then my environment can start to become cluttered, or I can start to neglect other areas of my life that I think are important. And so yeah, it definitely has a spillover effect where maybe I'm not so picky about you know relationships and communications within relationships per se, but it does affect also my I guess with how I communicate via email as well, and all kinds of yeah. So there's a lot of different things kind
That's
of going.
interesting. So how do you mean when it affects the way you communicate by email? What do you mean by that?
Sure, yeah, yeah. Good question. I think that I'll tend to. There's a couple things that come to mind. Um, I'll either tend to see, okay, here's an email and it's going to require some work, and so rather than replying to it right away, I'll put it off, and then so that can delay my communication because I know that I have to do something that's associated with that email, and I want to be able to get that thing done and tell the person I got the thing done instead of, oh, I'm working on it, kind of, and so I think the perfectionism side of me wants to be achieved and have the result done. But so there's that kind of delaying the communication, and that's a problem I've recognized where I'm trying to just email more frequently as things are in progress. But also, I also very much tend to add a lot of detail, get way too much into the weeds with detail, and spend too much time on emails when the recipient isn't going to spend that much time reading the email, doesn't want all the detail, and so I'm kind of wasting my own time and their time, and I'm recognizing that I need to just be more short and concise and to the point, and if it's going to be something longer, then maybe make a phone call, or something where it's going to make more sense and be more engaging than just a one-sided uh, wall of text.
Yeah, so you put a lot more details into your writing the email, and
Sure.
explaining what's happening. Is that Yeah, okay. And actually, last month, in, in in the past few months, we had uh, Julia Kut, who has been corporate manager for many, many years, over 20 years, I think. And she was explaining to us how you manage, how she learned to manage perfectionists in her team.
Mm,
And what you're
mhm.
saying is interesting about detail, because she was saying, if I have a perfectionist in my team, I know it's going to take longer time to get the project delivered to me, but it will also be very, very detailed. So she said, if I want details, I will give it to the perfectionist in my team. If I just want it done here and now and 80% is okay, or even 60% is okay, then I'll give it to just anybody who's okay. Yeah, that's good enough. So what you're saying to me is you feel that that email has to have a lot of details and to be in a way for you to feel perfect.
Yeah, I don't know if, yeah, maybe it's not about me feeling perfect, but maybe the communication being effective enough or clear enough or having trans or conveyed enough information so that the point is clear, right? And yeah, so that it does
Yeah.
make sense, kind of, yeah, including too much detail instead of just the important information, I think. Yeah, and uh, yeah, I think
So
that's
there is no space for misunderstanding or not being clear or clarifying stuff enough.
right, right. Yeah, so that if I try to maybe answer questions in advance or, and then it also comes to wording things the right way. So a single sentence could be retyped a few times or, it's like it's too much. And so I'm trying to get better at just getting my thoughts out there and getting them sent and on with the day. Don't have to overthink, overanalyze, rethink everything more than once.
Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic. That sounds amazing. So we talked about the art. If we have a look at how it has been affecting your artwork, um, i- your perfectionism tendencies, how it has been affecting how has it been in the way for you from living the way you want to live, really, from doing the things that you want to do. How has perfectionism, how did it get in the way
Hmm. Okay. Yeah.
with
Great
your
question.
art? If we look at your art is a way that you express yourself. how
Right.
how has yes, this trait affected the way you can express yourself through your art?
Yeah. Yeah. Good question. So, I would, I think in an ideal world, I would love to be able to make the things that I want to make and that they're interesting enough to the world that they want to buy them, whether it's, artwork that I produce or um, educational art, things about art that's educational, right? So teaching Photoshop courses or teaching photography courses or, different things that are related to art. Uh, I feel like perfectionism gets in the way often because, well, sorry, let me start over. Um, yeah, I feel like perfectionism kind of prevents me from fully expressing what it is that I want to express or from even going deeper into what ideas I could express because specifically artwork tends to be, transformative in a way that you're trying to think of and share ideas that are beyond you. You may be, if you think of artwork over time that has changed the world. It's oftentimes communicating messages in times of grief or times of change or during revolution or very interesting momentous changes in the world, and artists pick up their brush or pick up their pen or write or whatever to express how that impacts their life, how that impacts the people around them. And it can also be on a more abstract level, on a higher level, to kind of, be a social commentary, right? And so I feel like oftentimes just thinking too much about the small details of my work prevents me from getting into anything larger and seeing the larger message of what it is that I could actually be saying with my work. Instead of just having something beautiful, I would like to share something meaningful as well. And so, I mean, that's kind of more on the deeper level,
Yeah.
on the granular level, I tend to, with my artwork, I want things to look super clean and fine. And so, when I'm painting, I'll use a lot of masking tape, and I'll make sure that the edges are super clean instead of just being freehand, and knowing that my artistic skill and my creativity will be able to make the lines or make the circles or make the shapes properly, even if it might be a little bit, off or not perfect. Then it's okay that, and so I'm trying to kind of overcome those things. And I think actually recently, after listening to one of your podcasts and listening to some other audiobooks and all these things about just doing the work and getting it out there, and expressing your ideas and not getting in your own way, I've picked up an old painting that I started, and I've been just going freehand at it, and it's been a lot more fun. And it's kind of released something that makes me feel more free, that I can just create what I want to create, and I don't have to make it super perfect, or I don't have to worry about what other people are going to think, or it's just creating for the sake of creating, and I think that's a good thing.
Amazing. Yeah, wow. So what you're saying is that it actually letting go of trying to make it all perfect, the edges and so on, it actually gives you a lot more freedom, or it makes you feel a lot more free to express yourself without worrying about what will others say, or will I be judged, or is this good enough, so on. That you feel a lot more free to express yourself and your art.
Yeah, yeah, I do. I think that just by embracing the fact that nothing I create can ever actually be perfect, and that it's a kind of too grandiose of an ideal to believe that perfectionism maybe even, or that something, the ideal of perfect even exists. And so that kind of letting go of that has allowed me to be on the more granular level, when I'm just creating, just be more free with my work. And I think over time that will allow me to see from the larger perspective, like I was saying earlier, to start looking at, okay, now that I'm not so critical of the work I'm creating, what is it that I actually want to say with the work I'm doing?
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. It really is. It's very inspiring.
Well,
Um, so Josiah, where do you think it comes from? This fear of failure, fear of not getting it perfect. Um, Otherwise, you're a failure. Perfect or failure, uh, or the fear of being judged. Um, where where do you think it comes from? Any any ideas?
yeah, that's a great question. I've been trying to think of it, and I'm sure there's multiple levels to this question.
Hmm.
um, I think as an artist, from an artistic perspective, we're artists are taught different concepts and artistic theories, like light and shadow and reflection and perspective and proportion. And you want to learn how to get these things right and accurate so that they look good to the human eye. And it can be really difficult to do that, right? And so you're kind of striving for this almost perfectionism. You want it to look accurate, you want it to look good. And I mean, you can certainly be abstract, right? You can certainly have an abstract style, or not be as perfect as it ought to be. But typically, when you're in class or when you're going to school, they're teaching you how to get things right and how to do it the right way. And I think that oftentimes that school in school you're demonstrating and proving your skill and proving your understanding, and you're kind of taught to follow the rules and color inside the lines. And so,
Mm.
I think that it's kind of
Color
gaining
inside
approval.
the lines. I remember that. It has to. So you used to do the inside the line, just following the line first, and then color it.
Right. Right.
Okay, yeah, so yes. Yes.
Yeah, so we're kind of taught to uh, seek approval from others, and taught to
Mm,
make sure that we're doing it correctly and with enough detail in order to
mm,
look accurate. And so I think that that kind of has been ingrained in my head. And on a deeper level, it's just wanting approval from your teachers or your peers or your parents, or different people in your life. And so just trying to do the best you can to get the approval that you're often looking for. I'm saying you, and I should say
yeah,
myself.
yeah, of course. Yes, yes, yeah. And I guess, our society is so built upon that, isn't it? Our society is so much built on, uh, you know, y- you do something good in school, you get stars, you get rewards, you then, everyone is like, wow, when you are thriving and you're running for success, and it's like, wow, and you start putting your self-worth in your achievements. And I guess that is that, with perfectionism, it's a lot about putting your self-worth in what you're achieving and what you're
Mm,
doing. And if not, if you don't get it perfectly right, then you're a failure. So it's very black and white, isn't it? If
yeah.
corners, the edges are not. So do you find yourself when you are doing, for example, the photography, you're looking at the photography that you have created, that you have taken, um, or a painting you made, do you find that you might be focusing on the flaws, what's not quite right, what you think, oh, I did this wrong, oh, this edge is not right, or oh, this color doesn't, rather than maybe the 80-90%, or maybe the 95%, or the 99% that you have done really well.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think that that also tends to, if you have done something really well and it's almost flawless, and then oops, you make a mistake, then you really want to fix that one little mistake, or so yeah, definitely it can kind of cause me to overthink what I'm creating, and overthink how, exactly. Yeah, yeah, basically, yeah, focusing on the flaws sometimes more than, what's good about things. And I think in photography, it's a little bit more difficult because you have to just retake the photo, and sometimes you have to change angles, or you don't have the right opportunity because the opportunity is gone, or things like that. But yeah, in artwork and painting, I, I definitely focus more on the flaws. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because you call it flaw. For you, it's something that's not quite right. At the end of the circle is not quite right, or the edge of the paper is not quite right, etc. The question is, it might be a flaw for you, but would that be a flaw for somebody else?
Oh, most likely not. Yeah, I mean, so many times I've gone to see my friends play in their band, a music show, and after the show, they're like, "Oh, I messed up this, this, and that," and I'm like, "I didn't couldn't tell." Great.
Yes, and you find that with dancers as well. They go, "Oh, I messed up one of the steps." Really? I didn't see that at all. No one noticed it.
Right, right. And so I think that goes back to, oftentimes, it's a it's a common saying that, artists are their own worst critic, and it's certainly true. Most of the artists I know are, because, uh, all my friends that I've all my peers in the art world, we're all very congratulatory of each other's successes, and we're all very happy for each other when you know things have been accomplished. And of course, if we're looking for feedback, then we'll provide critique or something and be honest. But I think that we definitely give as artists, we are our own worst critics and want everything to be like you said. I think you're right. We assign value to our self-worth based off of the results that we put out there.
Yeah, and that's the interesting part, isn't it? That, or perhaps the most unhelpful, one of the most unhelpful parts about perfectionism. That one thing is, as you said in the beginning, many people think that perfectionism is a good thing, attention to detail, you get it just right. On the other hand, when it's not just right for you, yeah, perhaps it's perfectly fine for other people, perfectly fine. Just draw your attention to that, and uh, then then the whole thing collapses. Your world collapses. Your self-worth collapses, and you doom yourself to be a failure.
Mhm.
Not that, oh, I didn't do this picture as I wanted to, or it's the painting that's not quite right, but it's I am I am a failure. S- So that's about your belief about yourself and who you are. And over a whole lifespan, not today, not about this painting, but I am a failure over a whole lifespan. So that's a big one, isn't it?
Right,
No
right, yeah,
wonder, no wonder it takes people down, and it takes away their confidence, and and their mood, affects their mood, their anxiety. So judging yourself that way.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, it can
Yeah.
definitely take you down. Like I said, stop you before you even start because you're just kind of overly critical of yourself. And like you said, if you identify as being a failure, then you're not going to create the results in your life that you want to create because as a coach, we have to really think about the future and the positive and what we can do and the possibilities instead of what we've done wrong. And so I'm definitely learning to embrace, making mistakes and recognizing that mistakes are okay and that, they're a natural part of everyday life. And that, I was thinking about this too, is that one thing that when we go out into nature, we love being outdoors, not because everything is perfectly set up and, very pristine and manufactured. It's because it's chaotic and it's
Mm.
wild and it's free and it's that kind of inner spirit inside of us that we want to let loose. And
And that's what
so
we expect of it as well. We expected it. We expect it to be chaotic. There is still an order in that chaos, in that circle of life as well. But we don't, the leaves are not all the same color. They're not all the same size, right? They're all different color. The trees, different sizes, and so on. Um, yeah. So that's right. So if nature can be in all sorts of beauty, different, why not us and the things that we create?
exactly, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned that you're you are a lot more aware now of what is, causing you challenge and roadblocks that you have caused by perfectionism.
Yeah,
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 so being able to take a step back. How is being aware of this affecting you now?
yeah. Good question. I being aware of what those kind of roadblocks are is helping me to kind of take a step back from them, and whether I have to get over them or circumnavigate them, go around, go under, find the side door, whatever it is, I'm recognizing, okay, this is what's in my way, and I need to get around it to continue doing the work, and I need to keep producing what it is that I want to produce, because there's so many people out there, and I think this is also part of it, especially for creative types, constantly comparing. There's so many people out there that you find, oh, this person's artwork is amazing, or that person's photography is phenomenal, and I wish I could do this, or I wish I could do that, and so you're constantly going back to learn new skills instead of just creating and doing what you can do. And I think that also gets back to the messaging. What is the message that you want to share versus
Yeah.
what medium are you producing it in? And so if I was only stuck with one medium, then I would have to figure out what's my message instead of having this whole wide range of mediums available to me and then constantly switching from one to the other because I see all these other great things that people are doing out there. So,
And
yeah,
compare.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and comparing. So I think it's definitely created some insight in allowing me to just keep moving forward and, recognizing that it's okay to make mistakes. Everything is a test and it's okay to learn from from the results and whether it's good or bad. And instead of just kind of focusing on the small details, like you were saying, or the flaws and what may be inaccurate or incorrect.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. And I'm sure, especially those who are recognizing this in their art, whether it's music, they might be musicians or dancers or photographers, um, painters. I'm sure they will be recognizing the things that you're saying. Uh, yeah, and hopefully they'll find your wise words helpful to move on, as perfectionism is standing in the way of them unlocking their full potential to express what they're really meant to express freely.
Right, right. Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah,
agree. I hope that more people out there are and more artists are able to see that perfectionism isn't necessarily the good thing that we thought it was or that I thought it was, but it can definitely get in our way and as it has gotten in mine. And so I hope that other creative types and artists can recognize that as well. So
yeah,
that, like you said, to be, reach their potential and create more fully.
yeah, and separating their self-worth from their work, their artwork,
Definitely.
or their professional life, and their self-worth they're not connected. uh, okay, is there anything that you think we haven't covered that you would like to cover, that you think is important? Any?
Yeah, so there were a couple of things that I jotted down that I thought were kind of interesting to note. When I was going to school for art, I was taking a fibers class, and I learned that in the textiles class, um, there's a tradition in the Navajo um Native American tradition where weavers, like rug weavers, will deliberately incorporate imperfections into their work as a way to kind of find a way out of their work so that they're not tied
Wow.
to it. Yeah,
How clever.
yeah. I thought that that was really cool. And then also the idea of um, kintsukuroi or kintsukuroi in Japan, where they repair broken pottery with gold to re reestablish and repair it and make it so that they're kind of honoring the passage of time and honoring the fact that it has been broken and recognizing that it's no longer perfect, and by doing it through gold it kind of makes it even more special in a way. And I think that that's really great because we should recognize that imperfections can lead us to more learning and more opportunities, and I think that's it's important. And so yeah, and then the last one was the Japanese worldview of wabi sabi, which is just acceptance of imperfection and acceptance of the impermanent and the incomplete, and kind of recognizing that we we're only here for a short time, so get out what you can and don't have to strive to make everything so perfect, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, those are really wise words. Thank you so much for sharing. I didn't know about the rug makers, but it does make sense because you can really, over time, become really hooked up on each and every line must be in a perfect length or perfect uh, width and so on, in a perfect way, because that's what you do all the time. So incorporating imperfection into weaving, it's really amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and there's other examples of it too in other countries around the world and other traditions, and so it's really fascinating how people have incorporated imperfection into their work and into their artwork to recognize that it's okay and that it can actually signify something beautiful.
Yeah, and when you were saying, about it's okay to make mistakes, if it's okay that it's imperfect, because in reality, it's subjective. Perfect is subjective, isn't it?
Totally. Yeah,
So what's
exactly.
perfect for, when we say, oh, that's perfect. Yeah, but not for somebody else. I think maybe that thing fits perfectly into that corner, but my husband may think that no, that doesn't fit that corner at all. So it's all subjective. What we think is great as
Right, right.
well, right? And the cost is important as well. What is the cost? You mentioned, for example, that you found yourself spending a lot of time writing an email in a lot of details, giving more than what they needed from you, and going back to sentences and correcting and recorrecting them and so on. And the cost, I guess, is your time, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
Time,
exactly.
energy. So
Yeah,
what's the cost? What's the gain as well? So that's, I guess, an important one to keep in mind, what it is costing you. And when you
def
said mistakes, yeah, part of growth, I guess. Yeah, learn and
mm,
move on. Yeah, that was really amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's been really amazing having you here as a guest, and I'm sure our audience got a lot out of it too. Thank you for the wise words as
oh,
well.
thank you so much, Eileen. It's been a pleasure to be here, and it's been such an honor to be on this podcast. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.